Hello, welcome to Train Signal. This is the Managing Alerts and Notifications lesson in the System Center Operations Manager 2012 training course. Alerts and notifications are a pretty critical part of the Operations Manager environment. This allows administrators to respond to unhealthy situations that might be present in the monitored environment and help to ensure that key systems remain operational. After all, if you're never told about a system going down, how are you supposed to respond to that issue? Simply put, an alert is raised when a monitored item falls out of its configured baseline. Now, that's a very generic general statement, but it's absolutely valid and it's absolutely accurate. There are hundreds and thousands of different items that are monitored with Operations Manager depending on the size of the environment. When one item goes out of its baseline, say a disk gets too low on disk space, an alert will be raised in the console so that an administrator can take appropriate action. When it comes to alerts, there are some things you need to know. First of all, how severe is the alert? Is it really critical or is it just sort of a nice to know? What caused the alert? Why did the alert get raised in the first place? What's the total impact of the situation that caused the alert? And how can I recover from the situation that caused the alert? Basically, how can I correct the underlying root cause that generated the alert in the first place? These are all really important questions that you'll need to answer each time an alert is raised in the Operations Manager console. With that in mind, we're now going to move over to the Operations Manager console and we're going to review an open alert so you can get an understanding for how to start answering some of those questions. And we are back in the console and we're going to get an understanding for why the local disk fragmentation level is high for drive C on this particular machine, which happens to be SCOM12-1. We're seeing the same situation on the domain controller. Now we get an alert description. It tells us that disk C has high fragmentation and the final fragmentation value is 12%. Okay, so is that good or bad? Well, it really depends. First of all, these are virtual machines, so it's probably not that big a deal. But this is going to raise an alert in the Operations Manager environment to let us understand that this is just a warning. It's not an error. So basically everything can continue to go on as normal. But we need to understand that this particular fragmentation level is outside of the predefined limits that were in the Operations Manager system and the management packs that we've already installed. Another really nice thing about the way that Operations Manager works is the way that it gives you information about just why this message is coming up. Now we've gotten the specifics that we've gone beyond 12% fragmented on this disk, but it also gives you some summary information about the monitor. Remember that raised the alert. The monitor is the individual element in the management pack that says, I'm going to watch this particular piece of hardware or software and try to find out when it goes out of balance, and then I'm going to raise an alert. So we'll talk about monitors elsewhere in this course, but the monitor watches for fragmented disk space. And it gives us some information about basically defaults for the configuration for this particular monitor and alert, and tells us why the disk might go out of balance from a defragmentation perspective. As you add and remove data, disk gets fragmented. You know, stuff that probably most administrators already know, but for those of you that are new to Windows, it gives you some really good insight into where to start looking for potential solutions to the problem. And then we have resolutions. What are some things you can do? You can, well, remotely, right from the Operations Manager console, kick off the logical disk defragmentation tool. Locally, you can connect to the server and run a defrag. It also gives some other information about the monitor that raised the alert. In this case, it says it does not support an on-demand recalculate health. And you'll see what that means later on. Personally, I think that's pretty cool. That right from the Operations Manager console, you can initiate a task that will then correct the situation that created the alert in the first place. So without having to go anywhere, click a button, you're done. In theory, of course. And that means that you're back in operation with a fully functioning system without the warning that raised the alert. You may be wondering why we didn't just disable the alert or change the alert to a higher threshold. That's because we'll be doing that elsewhere in this course. Now, the Health Explorer is a really cool utility. It's built into Operations Manager, and it's a tool that provides health details for every object in Operations Manager, and it refreshes by default every 30 seconds. So basically, you can get a look at your environment almost in real time from what's called the Health Explorer. You can choose a specific object and start to understand exactly how that object is being monitored. While you're in Health Explorer, you have two options as well. You can reset the health. For example, if you've corrected an issue, you can tell Operations Manager to just reset the health status of a monitor you know you've corrected. So let's say you've gone out to the server that has a fragmented disk, and you've manually run a defragmentation tool. You could then come back into Operations Manager and reset the health. It would reset that health monitor to green, and then Operations Manager's agent would then continue to watch that system to make sure that it stays within the predefined parameters. Or you can tell Operations Manager to right now go recalculate the health. For some objects this is not supported, for others it is, for most it is. But what this does is it tells the agent on the remote machine to get the current status of the monitor based on the information at hand. So let's say you're on a disk space monitor and you want to get current information because for some reason it doesn't seem current in Operations Manager. You can simply tell Operations Manager to recalculate the health of that statistic, and it'll go out and check the server to make sure that the latest disk space information is actually brought back into Operations Manager. Now our demo this time is going to be to use the Health Explorer and kind of drill down into some of the items that we have in Operations Manager. And here we are back over at the Operations Manager console, and as you can see we're in the Active Alerts view just like we were before. To open up the Health Explorer, simply select the alert you want to look at, right click it, and then just choose Open Health Explorer. And in a new window, you're going to get what you see on your screen, something like this. Now, right now, all you're seeing are errors, and that's because we have scope set to only show unhealthy child monitors. Now, this scope capability is kind of nice because it allows you to focus on what's wrong with the environment instead of having to focus on what's right with the environment. But for our purposes, I like to show you everything. So I close the scoping, and you can see that we have quite a bit more information now. First of all, the entity health overall is red. And that's because we have this logical disk free space error. And health does what's called roll up into the main object. So because part of the object is unhealthy, the entire object is marked as unhealthy because of this roll up capability. And if I select free disk space, you can get some information about default values that tells you why this could be the case. Well, normally at 300 megabytes or 500 megabytes, we're going to get either a warning or an error, or at 10% of free disk space or 5% of free disk space. Remember, disk drives continue to grow in size, so 300 and 500 megabytes from a pure disk perspective may not be enough. That's for a system drive. For a non-system drive, Operations Manager gives a little bit more in the way of free space before a warning or an alert is raised. And it gives you some information about the potential causes. Basically, running out of free disk space, it's pretty clear why that's happening at some point. A disk file can be growing too large, you're storing too much on the disk, what have you. But all all monitors in Operations Manager have cause information associated with them. And then resolutions. So run some free disk space, do a backup and remove some of your old files, move files to another disk, or get more storage. Now another option you have down here, notice is the Start Disk Capacity View. Let's take a look at that. And this tells you that basically the free disk space is actually 80%. Now I'm going to explain why we're getting that critical alert in just a second. There's actually a good reason for it. And down here, it will give you information about how to add that to the graph. But we're seeing 80% free disk space. So why are we being alerted that that's an issue? Well, that's because I've created what's called an override. So we go to summary for the monitor. What this tells me is I've created a number of overrides that change the default behavior of this particular monitor. So I've told it at 90% of free disk space, raise an error, and 95% raise a warning. Now the reason that I did this was because I wanted to demonstrate how you could change a monitor to suit your needs. Now 90-95% are obviously insanely high. Generally at 90% free disk space, you're not that worried. But I wanted to demonstrate what would happen if a monitor went below a certain threshold that you define, rather than allowing the default operations manager definition to remain in place. I'm going to show you how to create overrides elsewhere in this course. But you can see that this override basically says, I've changed the default behavior of the management pack that says at 5% or 10%, raise a warning, and instead change it to 90% or 95%. And that's why we see what we see. If you go to the State Change Events tab, this tells you when information about this object has changed. So on November 12th, it went from really not being monitored to being monitored and healthy. On November 14th, it went from healthy to healthy. Oh, I forced it to reset. So basically, I right-clicked to this monitor and chose Reset Health, and that initiates a state change event. Again, the details pane just helps you a lot. It tells you why certain things happened. So this tells you that the monitor has been initialized for the first time, or it's exited maintenance mode. So that's why the monitor's state changed. And this time, it tells me that something went awry, and it's the logical disk free disk space counter instance name C:. So it tells me that something's not right with that monitor and it needs to be checked out. Now, if I want to see more information about this monitor, I can right-click it and choose Monitor Properties. And this gives you a whole slew of information about the monitor, including general information about it. Its parent monitor happens to be availability, because if you go below free disk space, it creates an availability situation. How often does the monitor run? Again, this is all overrideable through the use of overrides. Now, right now, it's not showing you the override values, it's showing you the default values. Company knowledge is things you put in here. So if you wanted to make some notes about this monitor, you could add knowledge here. Then here's the overrides, and you can see that I've overridden monitor logical free disk space. And again, if you click View Summary for the monitor, it shows you the overrides associated with the monitor. Now, I really wish it would put this information over on the other tabs, because I think it'd be less confusing. So, for example, because I've chosen to override this monitor, I wish that it would display the override values on the other tabs, but it doesn't. That's life, so just make sure you always check the override tab before you leave this screen. This tells you what's going to happen at certain intervals. So if it's under the warning threshold, you're going to see healthy. If it's over the warning threshold and under the error threshold, you'll see a warning. If it's over the error threshold, you're going to see a critical state for this monitor. When this happens, an alert will be generated based on these properties. And it's going to tell you the target is basically running out of disk space. With some monitors, you can configure a diagnostic and recovery task to automatically correct the situation. For example, with a disk defrag issue, you could tell it automatically go run a defragmentation against that server in order to be able to correct this defragmentation issue. That's not possible really with a free disk space issue, because you don't want Operations Manager necessarily automatically deleting information from your disk. And then product knowledge, and this is where you see that information about what's going on with the monitor and how it really works. And again, I kind of wish that these were replaceable parameters. It shows you the default values, but I wish it would also show you the actual values to make things just a little bit easier to administer. But again, just bear in mind, you always really need to double check the overrides tab before you leave this Health Explorer properties page so that you can get an understanding for exactly why something is working the way it's working. Now again, if we look at some of the other information, it's all green. And if we look at the average disk transfers per second, it's all good. Right now we don't see much in the way of state change because it's not doing a whole lot. Disk queue length is good. And this is really the one that matters for the most part, this queue length. It's the number of outstanding IOs on the disk. If that gets too high, you've got a major problem with storage performance. But I want to show you performance as well. This is called a roll-up monitor, and this is the monitor that monitors all performance statistics. If any of these have an unhealthy state, Performance Monitor also has an unhealthy state. And I'll open up the properties just so you can kind of get an idea for this. And this is, again, a roll-up monitor. And it rolls up to entity health. It rolls up to the top level health metric for the actual object. Now, there's a couple of different ways you can handle health roll-up policy. One is to do the worst state of any member, and the second is to do the best state of any member. So let's say that you're monitoring DNS servers, and you want to know, is my overall DNS server service available? Well, let's say you've got 4 DNS servers and only one has a red state. Well, in that case, yes, DNS is still available because only one of your 4 DNS servers is down. So it would roll up as a green arrow even though one of your DNS servers is down. What that tells you is that the problem is a problem. You're going to still get an alert in the console saying you have a DNS issue, but the overall environment is still going to be healthy. And that's because you've deployed multiple DNS servers side by side for high availability, and it's working the way it's intended. If you only had one DNS server, then a red state would be a disaster because you would have major issues with the ability to do name lookups for your users to be able to get out to the internet and elsewhere. So that's where group state comes really in handy, this health roll-up policy. In the case of the DNS server, one DNS server being down, not a big deal. For other systems, one system being down could be a big deal, and that's going to be the worst state of any member. And you may want to roll up an unhealthy state to the object to indicate a larger problem in the environment, even if there's multiple systems in a health group. So notice here, this is a worst state of any member. So any of these items that are red X's are going to roll up as a red X to performance. And again, alerting, this is going to tell us there's an error or an issue. Diagnostic and recovery, product knowledge, then basically company knowledge and overrides if there are any. And again, we've got an override in this management pack, so it's showing us some of that information, even though we don't really have anything in this particular tree that relates to overrides. It's under availability, but it still shows that there's an override elsewhere in the management pack. Although if you click View Summary for the monitor, you won't see it because there's no overrides for this particular monitor. If we go to this one, see what we see on the override screen. Nope, none for the monitor. It's only at the object level that you're going to see the overrides when you choose for the monitor. Now, I mentioned reset health and recalculate health earlier. I could just choose to reset the health of this monitor right now, assuming that I've corrected the issue, in which case it'll go back to green. Or I can choose to recalculate the health, in which case Operations Manager will instruct the agent to go back out to that system and check the amount of free disk space and return it back to Operations Manager to determine if this monitor is still out of whack. So let's talk a little bit more about alerts. First of all, you have what are called alert storms that can take place in Operations Manager from time to time. And although they're not as prevalent as they used to be, they can still happen from time to time. And this happens when either many items fail at once or many items with dependencies fail at once. So what that means is if you have a device that has lots of things behind it and it fails, you could end up with a significant number of alerts being raised in the Operations Manager console. And this is caused when certain devices or services fail, which is expected because that's the time when Operations Manager is supposed to raise alerts. But alert storms can be annoying, and you want to be able to get them out of the way because things may not really be down. They may appear down to Operations Manager because it can't communicate with them, but they're until you get a root cause or the central object back in service, those other items aren't going to really matter anyway. So you may want to be able to close active alerts in various ways, and that's what we're going to do right now in the Operations Manager console. And we are back over on the Operations Manager system. And let's say I want to close an alert. Let's say I want to close this logical free disk space alert. I can right-click it and simply choose Close Alert. Or I can set resolution state to new or closed. Or I can forward the resolution elsewhere if I have connectors that are connecting this into other systems. But I just want to close the alert. Now, this doesn't mean it won't get re-raised later if the situation is not fixed. But for now, it gets the alert out of the way and off my screen. Notice I can create overrides right from here too, but we're going to create overrides later. I just wanted to show you that while we're right here. And I can view or edit the settings of the monitor right from this screen. I don't have to actually use Health Explorer if I don't want to. Or you can open up other views of this alert, a diagram view, an event view, state view, performance view. There's not much to see in performance view for a disk space alert, but if you wanted to see a diagram, you're not going to see a whole lot, but I'll show you what a diagram looks like for an alert view. Basically, it just shows you a picture of the server. There's really no children here, so that's it. You'll see diagrams elsewhere in this course anyway, especially when we get to the vSphere discussion. Now, let's talk about notifications. An alert is raised by things in a management pack, monitors, rules, whatever. And these are sent to the Operations Manager console via the agents really that are on the machines that are being monitored in the environment. Notifications, however, are the process of notifying an administrator that an alert has been raised. Now, this happens so that an administrator can be notified that some action may need to be taken. And that's really the job of the notification in Operations Manager. By default, Operations Manager ships with no notifications configured. So you have got to take steps to configure what are called notification channels so that you can have an administrator be notified that something's gone awry in the environment. Really, a channel is just a delivery mechanism to tell you that an alert has been raised. That could be something like email, instant messaging, text message, or running a command prompt of some kind. And these are really the 4 notification channels you have at your disposal when it comes to Operations Manager telling you that an alert has been raised in the environment. And the way this works is you configure a notification action account. Now this account needs rights for an SMTP server or an IM server that'll handle the communications channel. And that could be an Exchange server, a local SMTP server, link, whatever. And you enable the desired notification channels. So if you want to have just, for example, text message be a channel, great. You can configure SMS gateway to get out to the text messaging services, but you can use text messaging as one of your channels. You then enable notification subscribers. So you tell Operations Manager who is going to receive these alerts. You've enabled the channel, so we enable the underlying notification mechanism, but now we've got to say who's going to receive these notifications. And then finally, we have the creation of the overall notification subscription. For example, notify an administrator immediately when a critical alert is raised. And again, when critical alerts are raised, you probably want to know. So as you see on your screen, this is the demonstration that we're going to do right now in the Operations Manager console. And here we are, back in the console, and as you can see, I've gone to Administration and chosen Notifications. Now the first thing we've got to do is configure a notification action account. We're going to do that by going to Run As Configuration, Profiles. We've got here a notification account. This is the Windows account used by notification rules. Use this account's email address for these purposes. So we'll go to properties. And when we go to the run as accounts, we're not going to see anything here. So we're going to go to the add button. We could use one of the existing accounts if they make sense. You can't really easily use a local service or local system or network service account. So we're going to create a new account here. This is going to be the create run as account wizard. It's a Windows account. It's the notification action account. I'm just going to call it NAA. I am going to use the administrator account because I don't have a special notification action account created, although in a production environment, it would make sense to create a specialized notification action account. And the domain is GlobalMantics. Now, we have to decide how we want to distribute this account to various systems in the organization. Do we want to have it be more secure or less secure? When it's less secure, you're telling it, I want the credentials to be distributed automatically to all managed computers. Notice that administrators of all of these recipient computers will then be able to access the run as account credentials. This is why you want to create a separate run as account with very minimal privileges when you're going to go ahead and do this process. Or you want to manually select the computers to which the run as profile will be distributed, or the credentials. I'm going to go ahead and just allow it to distribute it to all machines and click create. Now it's going to tell me I need to associate this with a run as profile, but we're already doing that because we started this process from the profile itself. And click OK. And save. Now the assumption here is that this account will have the ability to do, for example, relay through your Exchange server or a local SMTP server so that it can actually email or text or whatever it needs to do systems that are out of whack. So basically, if you've got a system that has raised an alert, you have to be able to have a way for the email to make its way through Exchange if you have an email notification. Or if you have an IM notification or a text notification, perhaps you have a link account that you're going to have set up to be able to use one of these notification channels to be able to receive these alerts. And that's done. So we now have populated our notification accounts. Now we have to decide which notification channels we want to enable. So we'll go to New, and this time we'll just do Email SMTP. The SMTP server will be exchange.globalmantics.com. And the authentication method can either be anonymous or Windows integrated. Well, if you have a relay, it can be anonymous. In which case, you wouldn't necessarily need to have rights through the Exchange server to be able to send these emails, except for having an open relay on the SMTP connector on your Exchange server. And the return address could be helpdesk@globalmantics.com. And if it's not able to send the mail, how often is it going to retry? Every 5 minutes. Notice you can have multiple SMTP servers listed. Again, for the best possible scenario, you should have multiple email servers. Now, how do you want the message to look? This is going to send you a subject that says name, resolution, state, and it's going to provide information about basically the alert that's being raised. And if you click the right arrow here, you can get a list of all of the various fields you're allowed to use in the subject. Alert severity, alert priority, alert category, resolution state. And the same goes for the subject, or the email message, I mean. You can choose to send this with either high, low, or normal importance. And then click Finish. And that's it. So when it comes to notifications, we defined the how. This is going to be email. Now let's define the who and the what. And that's going to be the role of subscribers, the who, and subscriptions, the what. What are we going to send? So we'll go to subscribers. You see that there are no subscribers right now. We'll click new. The subscriber name will be administrator. Now it knows this because that's who I'm logged in as. Next. We can also set notification times. So if you have an on-call schedule, for example, there's a rotating on-call, or somebody has a rotating cell phone, for example, you can actually have it so that different people get different messages at different times. And that's really useful because it makes the whole notification process very granular, and you can really customize to meet the workflow needs of your own organization. For our purposes here, we're going to simply choose always send notifications. And the address of the subscriber, click add, is going to be administrator@globalmantics.com. So we'll click next. The channel type is going to be email. And next. Again, always send notifications. And finish. And again, we could go through now and add additional subscribers if we like, but for our purposes here, we are finished. And when we're done, we'll see the Global Mantics Administrator is now listed as a subscriber. But what are we going to send? You'll see that there are no subscriptions. So, as you may guess, we're going to click the New button. And the subscription name is going to be All Alerts, All Critical Alerts. You know, in the middle of the night, we don't really care about warnings generally, but critical alerts we might. And we're assuming that we've groomed Operations Manager enough where we're not getting constant critical alerts for things that don't make sense. So we'll do all critical alerts, choose next. And we're going to choose conditions of a specific severity or a specific priority. The severity will be critical. And do OK. Now, priority is a little bit different. If we'd selected that, it would be low, medium, or high. For our purposes here, we're just interested in critical alerts of the severity type, so we're not going to worry about the priority alerts. But notice there's lots and lots of different ways you can be very granular here. So this means that even for large IT teams, you can completely customize the way that Operations Manager reports out to different teams, different people at different times of day, so that you can have complete workflow control and complete notification control so you don't drive your people crazy. And I'll just show you some of the other items that are here. And then we'll click next. We'll add a subscriber. We only have Global Mantics here. So I simply click the search button to find him, click add, and OK. So Global Mantics Administrator will be notified by email whenever a critical alert is raised for anything. And click next. We'll add a channel. We just have email, so we'll use the email channel. Click OK. And do we want to delay the sending of the alerts? So this is something you can do that can be useful if you find you're having alerts that resolve themselves, which we all see that sometimes. You could delay sending the alert notification for, say, 5 minutes, so that if the alert clears itself up, you're not unnecessarily notifying people and having them react when it may not need reaction. But we're going to leave the option here to send notifications without delay. And click next, review our settings. And then notice, make sure that this checkbox is selected, enable this notification subscription, and click finish. And that's it. We'll click the close button. And we now have all critical alerts added as a subscription to the Operations Manager environment. Now, if you ever want to disable this alert, simply click disable. That'll turn it off. If you want to get rid of it completely, choose delete. Finally, let's talk about maintenance mode. Most organizations have a maintenance window. Basically, they have a time during the week when they can bring systems down and do patches or make changes, things like that. Other organizations use change management techniques, but they still have planned outages. Basically, they're going to be able to take systems down to do maintenance. Now, during a planned outage, you don't really want to see Operations Manager throwing alerts all over the place because you, for example, taken down the DNS server. So you can place items into maintenance mode. When in maintenance mode, alerts, notifications, rules, and other items are suppressed at the agent level. And this keeps Operations Manager from reacting when an alert would normally be raised in the production environment. So basically what this says is, leave me alone until the maintenance window's over, and then after the maintenance window's over, I'll turn you back on, and you can start raising alerts at that point if it becomes necessary. So we're going to go over and do a demonstration for entering maintenance mode, but before we do that, I want to talk about a tip. Microsoft does not recommend that you place management servers themselves in maintenance mode, as this can result in instability and unreliability in the environment. So just don't put your management servers in maintenance mode. Pretty much anything else is fair game. But we're going to go over now to the console, and I'm going to show you how to enter maintenance mode. And we're back at the console, and you'll notice right now I am in the monitoring area, and I've selected Discovered Inventory, which is where I'm going to see really all of the devices and all of the servers that I have in the Operations Manager environment. I'm going to do some maintenance on Hyper-V 5. So I'm going to right-click Hyper-V 5, choose Maintenance Mode, start Maintenance Mode. Now, it's going to ask me if I want just the selected objects or selected objects and their contained objects. So this is going to say basically if there's something that has other objects, so I want to place those objects in maintenance mode as well. Well, for a Hyper-V server, if you look at it from that perspective, if Operations Manager recognizes each virtual machine as a separate entity, then yes, I want the contained objects to go into maintenance mode as well, because those individual virtual machines would not be accessible either. Then we have to make some choices. What kind of maintenance is this? Now, is it just other, which is the default unplanned? Is it a hardware maintenance unplanned, or is it planned maintenance of some kind? Well, let's say that it's going to be operating system reconfiguration. This is going to be for installation of a service pack. Now, we expect it to take about 30 minutes. So we're just going to tell it to stay in maintenance mode for 30 minutes. Or we could tell it specifically when to end. So we know we're going to have this work done by that time, 7:22 a.m. or 30 minutes. So we can tell it, give me just an interval or give me basically up until a certain point, at which point the system will automatically exit maintenance mode. This way you don't have to remember to go back after the fact and re-enable everything in your environment. And notice it's going to suppress the following items while maintenance mode is active: rules and monitors, notifications, any automatic responses. So if you've got automatic responses set up to kick off when certain conditions take place in the environment, those will not happen during maintenance mode either, nor will state changes or new alerts be raised. Click OK, and you'll see a little wrench show up next to the item, which tells you that it is in maintenance mode. Now, you can also then choose to edit the maintenance mode settings, which just brings you back to this window, or to stop maintenance mode. If you choose stop maintenance mode, it simply brings the item out of maintenance mode. I'm going to let it stay there just because I feel like it. And that's basically how maintenance mode operates in Operations Manager 2012. And that also brings us to the end of this lesson. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.